What were your inspirations for your art pieces or your art?
Well, it's centred around animals, really, and often mounted with inappropriate other animals or people. Um, that was the start of it. And then it broadened into getting images from seaside postcards, um, being influenced by animals I saw at the zoo, Twycross Zoo. Um, so it was a sort of the anthropomorphic aspect of it is very important because they they represent the animal, but in a slightly humanistic way, you know. So they and that tends to appeal to people.
Yeah.
Uh, when I was teaching at Solihull Technical College, I had access to ceramics, the ceramic department. A colleague of mine, Mr. Mottershead, allowed me to use the kiln, the clay to a degree. So that advanced my knowledge of working in clay. And the bigger items are originated from access to clay. And subsequent to that, when I made smaller objects, it was sometimes used the sort of material they use in the motor trade, mixed with plasticine, which is very good for making small items, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I was headhunted by a Dutch entrepreneur who saw my work in strange ways in Covent Garden. And he thought I would be capable of originating original models for the open market, which is mainly destined to the mantelpieces of Europe. But so I did that for 20 years. And as a sideline, I originated some of my own ideas, which weren't really suitable for that area. And when I eventually stopped working for the Dutch, I went back into the old practice of devising schemes and objects and models for myself, which were sold through art galleries rather than being mantelpiece objects. And during the period of time I was working for myself, I used to enter the Leamington Open exhibition. And on two occasions, I was lucky enough to win the People's Prize with a raven in winkle pickers and a punk crocodile, which people might remember.
What's changed from the beginnings to now in art for you? So when you first started to now, has there been any big differences?
I think I made, in a sense, a made mistake of learning about mold making and using silicon rubber and support molds. So it gave the opportunity to duplicate the items. And in my head, it was like making money in the sense that every time you filled the mold, you thought it had sold. But you tended to end up with far too many blank objects, which you hadn't got the time or interest to paint up. So, in lots of ways, it was better to make one-off items, which I then began doing using plasticine, papier-mâché, and milliput, which is a plumber's material, which you've got a certain amount of time to work on at the surface, and it'll take up any amount of detail. And then you paint them with acrylic paint or um, any other, paints which are suitable for the surface decoration. Yeah. So it was originated in plasticine, and then you'd make a papier-mâché shell on which you could then build up any detail. So you had a general form, which is detailed with the milliput surface, which you could decorate texture to in any detail. So some of the big objects were originated from clay with silicon molds and cast in a resin shell or a plaster shell, and were often rather heavy, but that's what a lot of the items in the sale are made out of. And a lot of the items are made using the other technique, originated in plasticine, and then a papier-mâché shell, and then finished off with a detailed milliput detail.
Any interesting stories when making the sculptures? Any mishaps or?
Whenever I got a private commission to do something which is slightly different from what I normally do, it was often problematical because I was fulfilling a commercial brief, but it was tempting to do them financially. We did make about 50 apples to promote a certain apple for the greengrocer, and also a little pig advertising a chain of butchers. I remember doing about 100 bottles. But the duplication of them, so it became a job, and rather it was just time consuming and not particularly interesting. So there was much more return for following your own ideas and making one-off bottles, you know. So I once made a giant egg out of this sort of Zeppelin structure for an egg producer, which turned out to be a nightmare, which eventually took a lot of. We started off by trying to cast one of those bouncy rubber ball things, you know. But anyway, sort of much to the amusement of my colleagues, it turned out to be a bit of a fiasco. Yeah.
What mediums are used when creating the sculptures? What materials?
Well, the best material, I think, is really modelling clay. It has the life of being too malleable, too much liquid content, and then during its drying period, which you can retain by using a water spray and covering it with plaster, a polythene bag situation, so you can retain its condition and work on it for a long time. So the big items, such as the large pig man that was exhibited in the Herbert Art Gallery, were made with clay, and it's by far the nicest thing to work with, really. And you can make very quick progress because it's great lumps of clay that you gradually get the root shape quite quickly, and then modify it, change it quite dramatically, and then work forever on the detail surface. So, but what your fingers can't do in terms of forming the clay, you've got to make a tool. For instance, you can make special eye making tools, which are the concave version of an eyelid, a whole eye, so you can press it into the clay, or you can make whatever. So it's a question of whatever your fingers can't do, you use a device. It might be a ready-made object like a spoon or a fork, a scratching tool, or an imprinting tool, or whatever. But you can make a big variety of surfaces using invented tools. And you can, even with the very small objects, you can make get down to very fine stamps and things. Anyway.
Nice. Why is now the time to sell?
Well, it's largely been caused by moving into a smaller house and having far too many objects, and because the powers that be haven't given me a retrospective in the local gallery, I thought I would enter them into an auction where they hopefully would be effectively sold to people that knew about me, having been collecting the bottles for some time. So, relying on previous sales, I will inform people that have previously bought objects from me about the auction and hope to have a good result.
And the last question: will you be making more after this sale?
I think I shall continue making small objects, but since I've moved, I've got to stop using materials like plaster and clay and resin because it's not very suitable for a domestic studio. So I spend a lot of time doing drawings and hopefully compiling the drawings to make some form of book. So I think it might be more drawings than models, but I'll do both because it's a form of Tourette's. So if I've got a piece of paper and a pen, I can't help producing some item, whatever it might be, something I'm interested in at the moment. So the cafe I attend has got a collection of my work in serviette form, which is sometimes banded up as a exhibit. So I think it's a form of helpless drawing Tourette's. I'm never happier than spending any time drawing.